Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. That 2025 high school recruiting class officially coming to a close. And the South Carolina fans who've been rocking with the boys the last couple of years know this is the time where, we like to take a step back and say, hey, the freshmen coming in this 2025 cycle, who are the freshmen that are going to have a day one impact on this football team in 2025? And this conversation's been more and more fun as the years have gone on because you look, 5 to 10 years ago, it was really rare for freshmen, especially in the SEC, to come in and make an immediate impact. These kids coming out of the high school ranks, they're just different in this modern era of college football. A lot of them are physically and technically ready to play at the collegiate level. And South Carolina's got a few names that it is hard for me to see them not playing a role in 2025. My favorite part about this episode is hearing from everybody else. If you're a South Carolina fan that follows the high school recruiting trail pretty damn closely, you probably have a guy or two that you think's going to stand out as a freshman. Would love to hear from the South Carolina fans in the comment section. And also just want to say thank you to you guys. Many of y'all know I love talking the high school recruiting trail. The amount of support that y'all continue to show to the boys during the offseason as we talk the high school recruiting trail, it means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Now the attention is going to get focused on, hey, building that 2026 class out. What are we seeing in spring ball? Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Now, when you're having this conversation of trying to predict what freshmen immediately impact this football program, there's probably two things you have to look at. One is the prospect that you're picking, physically ready to step on a college football field as an 18-year-old kid and go make an impact. I think the second thing you have to have is, hey, what does the South Carolina depth chart look like? Is there an opportunity for a freshman to come in and make an impact? The one position where I love the players that South Carolina brought in. And number two, there's some big time opportunity to get into the rotation is at the wide receiver spot. Let's start with Malik Clark. Early enrollee. This kid is a box checker that as his senior season went on, I'm just continuing to buy stock in this kid. And if I were to sell this, I think the South Carolina fans pretty well aware of Malik Clark and what he brings to the table. If I were to sell the South Carolina fans in 30 seconds on Malik Clark, you're talking 6'2", buck 85, 10.62 in the 100-meter dash. Now, what stands out to me about Malik Clark is he's not just a big body that runs really fast. Really good after the catch, can create some separation in his route trees. What's the biggest difference between Nick Harbor and a guy like Malik Clark? Nick Harbor was just kind of a linear athlete when he came in out of high school. He's just a really, really big kid that runs really, really freaking fast. But there was probably some development that was needed in terms of his all-around wide receiver play. Kind of pigeonholed kind of just being that deep threat. I look at Malik Clark and say, yeah, he can be that guy because he's really big and really fast, but he's also really dynamic with the football in his hands. He also shows the ability to create a lot of separation in those short intermediate route trees. I think that's going to allow Malik Clark to get on the football field early. And we've seen a lot, especially at the wide receiver position. Freshmen are routinely coming in and making an impact. And you look at the South Carolina depth chart, we can pull it up for real quick. Outside of Nick Harbor, Mazeo Bennett, Jared Brown, I think it's really wide open for some of these freshman wide receivers to come in and make an impact. And quite frankly, I would add a guy like Brian Rowe into the mix. Brian Rowe is already getting kind of some buzz coming out of winter workouts. Probably going to be a little bit more of a slot wide receiver. It's another guy that can come in and make an impact for South Carolina. And it might not be as flashy as Malik Clark. The size speed combination is not there with Brian Rowe like it's there with a guy like Malik Clark. But Brian Rowe, man, separator, really, really juiced up athlete, good after the catch. It's hard for me to see. And I think this probably had a little bit to do with South Carolina not going out and getting in a bidding war for some of these top wide receivers. I think it's like, hey, we like these freshmen coming into our program. we're going to bet on these kids we've evaluated out of high school to make an impact immediately for us, along with guys like Nick Carter going into year 3, Bennett going into year 2, guys that we like a lot on a roster already too. The wide receiver position, I think, jumps out immediately because it's a part of South Carolina's depth chart that certainly gives you the ability as a freshman to come in. And I also think he's got some really good wide receivers coming in as well. Now, the next position that I want to talk about is the off-ball linebacker spot. Let's talk about a guy that has shot up the rankings over the last couple of weeks, and that's Donovan Darden. Do I think he's an immediate impact guy? I think there's an opportunity in the South Carolina linebacker room for him to be so, because you look at all the production South Carolina lost at linebacker, there's not really a proven commodity in that linebacker room. I really like Justin Okoronkwo coming in from Bama. You know, Sean Murphy's a guy that's been around college football. You really like Fred Johnson. You like some of the names and you like the athletic profiles you're putting in the linebacker room, but there's not necessarily a guy that you know exactly what they are. Now, the thing with Donovan Darden is there might be a little bit of a transition phase where he spent most of his high school career on the defensive side of the football coming off the edge, you know, kind of an on-ball linebacker as a pass rusher. Making that transition to the off-ball linebacker spot where you're playing at the second level, you know, picking through traffic, the from an athleticism standpoint, Donovan Darden has the ability to play immediately. Now, between the ears, getting used to that new position, that's probably what you're monitoring during spring practice. And I will say this, it's not all that rare for these off-ball linebackers to have spent a lot of time rushing off the edge at the high school ranks because they're just freaky athletes. It's like you want your best athletes on the high school football field rushing the passer off the edge. So that transition might look a little bit smoother than we're giving credit for. I think there's certainly an opportunity for him to. I think he has the physical gifts to do so and be an impact guy early. Can he put it all together going into his freshman year? That probably also kind of depends on what do you get from Justin Okoronkwo going into year 2. You know, what does Sean Murphy give you? What does Fred Johnson give you going into year 2? But I would predict Donovan Darden to probably get involved in the off-ball linebacker position at some point for South Carolina in the 2025 year. Now, a guy that's not as ranked as highly and certainly doesn't headline the class, but I might say is more ready to contribute early is AJ Holloway coming from Buford, Georgia. This is an off-ball linebacker that's played a lot at that off-ball linebacker spot at the high school ranks. You know, 6'2", he's up to 235 pounds. He knows what he's doing at the off-ball linebacker spot. Now, he's probably not the athlete that Donovan Darden is, but a guy that knows what he's doing as a freshman, he might have a better chance at getting on the football field early for South Carolina because he has more experience at that position. The last position that you're looking at here, because you start looking at the depth chart and say wide receiver is a little thin, but we like the talent. Linebacker room is probably the biggest question mark we have on the team. The second biggest question mark is probably on the inside of the defensive line. Now, I'm kind of cheating a little bit, but we'll kind of include him in this freshman class. The number one JUCO prospect in the country, Xavier Hardy, he's up to 295 pounds, which is really big. You know, South Carolina is looking for, right now, South Carolina is just looking for bodies that can play on the inside of the defensive line at the SEC level. Liked Xavier Hardy coming out of high school. Actually was kind of slated to go to South Carolina coming out, goes the JUCO route. This might be the most important newcomer for South Carolina because that is a position where I think a lot of South Carolina fans are probably a little concerned at not necessarily the talent level, but hey, do we have enough bodies to stay fresh and do we have enough depth on the middle of that defensive line? If Xavier Hardy can be that guy, and he's got that JUCO experience under his belt, so he's probably a little bit more physically developed. If Xavier Hardy can be that guy, really, really big news for South Carolina. The last one I'll throw in there is Christian Ingram. Now, unfortunately, Christian Ingram's not going to be in for spring practice, but you talk about just having the size to be a guy that comes in early. Christian Ingram has that, right? 6'6", 290 pounds. I think there's still some development that needs to take place. He's probably not a guy that's top of the list in terms of day one impact guys. But if he can be a guy that gives you 10 to 15 quality snaps a game on the defensive line, that's another huge storyline for South Carolina. And I would predict that South Carolina is going to go through spring practice, try to evaluate, hey, what do we have from Xavier Hardy? What do we have from some of the young guys moving up this pipeline? This might be a position that South Carolina might add in that spring transfer portal window, because outside of this position and maybe at the off-ball linebacker spot, I am looking at a lot of check boxes for the South Carolina team going into 2025. If you can get some of these freshmen, some of these newcomers to come in and have an immediate impact for South Carolina, that could be huge for the South Carolina team going into 2025, where I view this team as a legitimate threat in the SEC because of the quarterback play and because of the star talent that they have on this football team. We'll close it out there. From to the South Carolina fans, call your shots. Let it fly in the comment section. What freshmen do you think have the biggest impact on this football team? Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The attention is now turned to spring ball. The attention is now turned to the 2026 class. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.